You have been walking under a protection you could not name, and the reason you have felt watched over in quiet ways is because something greater has been moving around you. What has seemed like delay has often been restraint, and what has felt like silence has often been covering. The message in your title is not small, because it says that forces beyond what you see have been working to keep you from what would have broken you. Stay with this, because the way you have been carried will begin to make sense. There have been moments when your breath tightened before you even knew why, when your shoulders carried a weight your mouth never named, and when the room around you felt too loud even in silence. You may have thought that was only exhaustion, but your body was telling the truth before your thoughts could organize it. You have been sensing pressure, and that pressure has not always been punishment. Sometimes protection arrives as tension first, because the soul notices danger before the mind can explain it. You have been living with a kind of alertness that others do not understand. You have learned how to keep moving while carrying questions that never fully settled. Even your sleep has sometimes felt interrupted by a depth you could not translate. Yet what was disturbing you was also refusing to leave you exposed. There is a reason certain conversations have drained you quickly. There is a reason some places have felt wrong, even when nothing obvious was wrong. Your life has been speaking in signals, and those signals have been more merciful than chaotic. You have not been losing peace for no reason. You have been being spared from the kind of peace that would have made you careless. That is why this message reaches you now, because what protected you in secret is ready to be understood in the open. What has been happening around you is not random, and it is not merely emotional weather passing through your days. It is revealing that your path has been under a kind of guarding that you only recognize after the danger has moved away. There are things you were not allowed to carry, and there are doors that did not open because they would have led you into collapse. You will understand by the end that the closed door was not humiliation, the delay was not abandonment, and the interruption was not failure. You will see that what looked like interruption was often preservation, and what looked like resistance was sometimes redirection. You are not being dragged through confusion for entertainment. You are being led through discernment. Some of the strongest protection does not shout, because it works by quietly arranging what you cannot yet arrange for yourself. That is why your spirit has been uneasy in places where your mind wanted to settle. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. The message is teaching you how to recognize rescue while it is still disguised as discomfort. It is also teaching you that not every strong impression is your fear speaking. Some of it is wisdom arriving before language. Some of it is the mercy of being stopped in time. And some of it is the unseen hand of care preventing a wound you would have spent years explaining. Keep listening, because the signs are not against you. This is why ordinary moments have carried unusual weight. Like standing at the sink with cold water running while your mind drifts somewhere deeper, or sitting in the car after a long day and feeling that something has changed, even though nothing visible has moved. The scene looks simple, but the inside of you is not simple at all. You may have looked at your phone and felt the urge to answer less, to explain less, to protect your peace more carefully. You may have noticed that certain messages arrive with a strange heaviness attached to them, as if your spirit recognizes the cost before your mind agrees. Protection often enters through the smallest obediences, the quiet pauses, the decision not to rush into what everyone else would rush into. When the hand hesitates over the screen, when the chest tightens before a call, when the room feels like it is asking you to be still, that is not nothing. The unseen has often prepared the visible through those small interruptions. You have been learning that not every opening is meant for you to walk through. You have also been learning that every pause is not a prison. The difference matters because one closes you in and the other keeps you alive. In the middle of an ordinary day, a greater order can be at work. A cup on the counter, a seat by the window, a silent hallway, a message left unread for a few minutes. All of it can carry the mercy of restraint. You are being trained to feel that difference. You are being shown how safety can arrive without applause. And you are being invited to trust what steadies you more than what excites you. This is part of why you have always felt things a little earlier than other people. You catch the shift in tone, the slight change in atmosphere, the unspoken tension in a room, and you do not know whether to call it sensitivity or burden. It is both, but not in the way shame tells you. What has been forming in you is discernment, and discernment often feels heavy before it feels clean. You were not made to move through life numb, because numbness would have let danger stay hidden too long. That is why you notice when a smile is strained, when a promise is empty, when a kind word is carrying a sharp edge behind it. The gift is real, but so is the fatigue that comes with seeing more than you can immediately fix. There are days when you wish you could be less aware, and yet the very awareness that tires you is part of what keeps your steps from wandering into loss. You have not been chosen to carry a crown of superiority. You have been entrusted with responsibility in a world that often rewards pretending. That responsibility can feel lonely, especially when you see more than you can say. Still, it is not a curse to be awake. It is a form of protection itself, because it keeps your heart from agreeing too quickly with what would drain it. You have been learning to read the language of unease, and that language has been teaching you where life is thin and where it is safe. Even your hesitation has been wiser than you thought. Even your reluctance has sometimes been a mercy. The chosen one is not the one who never trembles. It is the one whose trembling still listens. There has also been opposition, and it has often worn ordinary clothes. It comes through distraction that feels harmless, through pressure that sounds reasonable, through relationships that consume too much, and through timelines that try to hurry your soul past its own rhythm. What opposes you is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply persistent. It arrives as another notification, another demand, another moment that asks you to forget yourself for a while. It can enter as comparison, making you look at someone else's pace and call your own pace a delay. It can even enter through helpful voices that do not understand what is being guarded in you. The danger is not only what hurts you directly, but what slowly trains you to ignore your own warnings. That is how sensitivity gets worn down, one unnecessary agreement at a time. You have felt the attempt to pull you out of stillness and into reaction. You have felt the pressure to explain what should have been protected by silence. You have also felt the strange sorrow of being around people who take from you without ever asking whether you are full. None of that means you are weak. It means you are noticing the shape of what resists your peace. The unseen protection around you has had to contend with these ordinary intrusions, and that is why some things never settled in your spirit, no matter how acceptable they looked. You are being taught to value peace as evidence, not as decoration. That lesson is hard, because it asks you to disappoint what feeds on your exhaustion. Yet, the more you recognize the pattern, the less power the pattern has. What once felt like confusion begins to look like a gate being guarded for your good. There is a reason the pressure has not simply gone away, and it is because pressure often reveals the place where obedience is still being negotiated. You have stood at the edge of decisions and tried to calculate what would cost less, what would look easier, what would keep everyone comfortable, but your spirit has known that some decisions are not about comfort, they are about alignment. You have not been foolish for hesitating. You have been human. Still, there comes a point when the heart can no longer pretend that delay is neutral. The moment arrives when you realize that every compromise has a price, and that the price is usually peace. You are beginning to see that what was calling you was not chaos, but clarity. The path does not need to be loud to be real, it only needs to be true. There have been signs in the body, signs in the timing, signs in the way certain doors refuse to stay open, and those signs are now gathering into a single message. You were being spared from settling too early, from trusting too quickly, from making room for what could not hold you safely. That is why the old cycles have felt tired. They no longer carry the same authority over you. A threshold is near when what once seduced you starts to feel small. You do not need to force your way through what has already revealed its limits. You only need to recognize that hesitation itself can be a kind of instruction when it leads you back to wisdom. The pressure you have felt is exposing a choice, and the choice is whether you will keep trying to soften what should instead be surrendered. Something in you already knows the answer. Imagine a lantern carried through a narrow corridor, shielded by a hand that knows exactly how much light can be shown at once. The flame is real, but it is not meant to be exposed to every draft. That is what your life has felt like in secret, as if something in you had to be kept from every sudden wind. You may not have had words for it, but you have known what it is to be covered while moving. The lantern does not apologize for being guarded, because the guarding is what keeps the flame alive. That is the image your spirit has been living inside. There were seasons when the cover felt too tight, as if nothing was happening. Yet even then, the flame was not gone. It was being protected from forces that would have delighted in snuffing it out. You have been learning that hiddenness can be holy when it is not abandonment, but shelter. The corridor itself has been part of the mercy, because not every brightness belongs in every place. You have also learned that some hands tremble when they carry light, and that trembling does not mean failure. It means the light matters. The sealed places in your story have not been evidence of loss. They have been the exact shape of care. That is why you could not rush your own becoming. A flame hidden in a lantern cannot be rushed into daylight before the hand is ready. Your story has been doing a slow work of keeping what was precious from what would have scattered it. What felt like confinement was sometimes just protection with a narrow opening. What felt like delay was sometimes the lantern being carried through a passage too dangerous for exposure. And what felt like being overlooked was actually being held in the safest way possible. There was a time when that lantern did not even feel like a lantern. It felt like a small refusal to be consumed by what everyone else called normal. It felt like keeping your inner fire quiet, because loudness would have attracted the wrong kind of attention. Perhaps you learned this early, in a house where silence meant safety, or in a season when speaking too quickly made things worse. Perhaps you learned it later when trust was expensive and your heart became careful with who it opened to. Either way, the pattern did not form by accident. It formed because something in you knew how to stay alive. You learned how to hold light under a cover without letting the cover become your identity. That is an important difference, because many people mistake protection for personality and start living as if the narrow season is their whole name. Yours is not. The hand that guarded the flame was not trying to erase it. It was trying to preserve it until the right moment. Even the loneliness of that covered life had a purpose, because it taught you how to value what cannot be seen immediately. You were being prepared to carry something delicate without performing it. That preparation matters more than applause. It means that the strength now forming in you is not noisy strength, but lasting strength. It is the kind that knows how to stay lit when the room is cold. It is the kind that can wait without dying. And it is the kind that now begins to understand why the waiting happened at all. The opposition to that lantern has always been the draft, the careless hand, the open door at the wrong time, the voice that says light should prove itself by rushing into danger. That voice sounds like urgency, but it is often only hunger. It wants the flame to expose itself before it is steady enough to endure the air around it. It tells you that hiddenness is shame and that caution is fear. Yet what if caution was the very reason the flame survived? What if the covering was not an insult, but a rescue? You have lived through drafts that came dressed as opportunities, and you have learned that not every opening is a gift. Some openings are tests, and some tests are disguised as invitations to exhaust yourself. The lantern did not fail because it was not everywhere at once. It succeeded by remaining intact. There is deep wisdom in that. The thing trying to press against your peace has wanted you to mistake exposure for growth. It has wanted you to believe that if you were truly called, you would never need shelter. That is not how care works. Even sacred things are covered until the time is right. The pressure around you has therefore been less about destruction than about timing, because the wrong wind can still scatter the right fire. You may have felt this in conversations that seemed harmless, but left you hollow. You may have felt it in requests that asked for too much too soon. You may have felt it in the simple fatigue of trying to be available to everyone while remaining available to yourself. The lantern image explains why your boundaries have mattered so much. They were never just about preference. They were about preserving what the storm could not be allowed to touch. And that is why your soul has often said no before your mind knew how to explain the no. Then something shifts inside the corridor. The hand that carried the lantern loosens its grip just enough for the flame to breathe. The cover does not vanish, but it begins to serve instead of suffocate. What was sealed starts to understand its own purpose. The light is not being abandoned to the room. It is being readied for a safer opening. You can feel this movement in yourself when old fear no longer lands with the same force. You can feel it when what used to startle you now only warns you. You can feel it when your inner life no longer needs to shout in order to be real. The lantern is still the same lantern, but it no longer believes the cover is the enemy. It begins to recognize that the hand knew what it was doing. This is the moment where resistance loses some of its voice, because protection is no longer looking like limitation. It is beginning to look like preparation with intention. That shift matters. It means you are not being held back forever, only held long enough to be kept from harm that would have taught you to mistrust your own light. Something is opening in the way you see your past. The delay was not a denial. The closed space was not a prison. The narrowness was part of the passage, and once you see that, you stop pleading with the corridor as though it owes you an apology. You begin to thank the covering for the season it gave you. You begin to notice that the flame is stronger for having been protected. You begin to suspect that the place you feared most may have been the place that saved you. If even one part of that image has landed inside you, write 888 in the comments and come back to me. The code is a simple sign of quiet confirmation, not of performance, but of recognition. It says that what was hidden in you has been heard. It also says that your spirit is not asleep to the pattern anymore. Writing it is a small agreement, yet small agreements matter when they are true. There is no need to force anything larger than that. The point is to mark the moment when the lantern is no longer pretending not to know its own protection. So type 888 and then come back to me. Keep listening, because what was guarded is about to make even more sense. The protection around you was never only about keeping danger out, it was also about keeping your identity from being rewritten by what tried to pressure you. That is the deeper layer the corridor has been revealing. You were not merely being saved from events, you were being saved from agreement with a lie about yourself. There is a difference between surviving a season and belonging to it, and your story has been teaching you that you do not belong to every room you enter. The lantern did not have to believe the corridor was home, it only had to pass through it faithfully. In the same way, you have been passing through a season that could have taught you to live smaller than you were made to live. Yet something in you kept refusing that script. The refusal may have looked like exhaustion, hesitation, or emotional distance, but underneath it was a holy instinct. It knew you were more than the narrow answers people offered you. It knew that the cover was not meant to become your ceiling. You have not been wandering because you lacked direction. You have been discerning because the light in you was worth protecting. That realization changes how you interpret the ordinary now. A late reply is no longer automatically rejection. A closed door is no longer automatically loss. A quiet room is no longer automatically emptiness. These things can be the shape of a hand that knows how to hold flame. Your soul is beginning to accept that. It is beginning to stop accusing the silence of neglect. It is beginning to hear the difference between absence and restraint. That is a deep healing, because the language of protection is not always easy to trust until you have seen what happens when it is ignored. You are seeing it now, and the seeing is changing you. There has been a root beneath the struggle, and it is the pressure to believe that you must prove your worth by staying exposed. The world often rewards the lantern that burns too quickly, then praises it after it has consumed itself. You were never designed for that kind of devotion. You were designed for endurance, which means your light has to be governed by wisdom, not by applause. Somewhere along the way, you may have learned to fear what happens when you stop performing for the comfort of others. You may have worried that if you slow down, you will be forgotten, and if you hide, you will be dismissed. But the corridor has taught you that being unseen is not the same as being unheld. It has also taught you that not every witness is safe. The protection in your life has been rescuing you from the hunger to be validated by every passing eye. That hunger is expensive. It asks the flame to spend itself just to be noticed. Yet your spirit is now being returned to a quieter economy, where what matters is not how much you are seen, but whether you remain true. The pressure to explain yourself is easing because your inner light is becoming less negotiable. It no longer needs to announce its existence to justify staying alive. That is why you are beginning to feel the old pattern lose its grip. It cannot control what no longer begs for permission. It cannot drain what has learned how to be covered without shame. And it cannot rewrite the story of a lantern that knows it was guarded for a reason. The root of the struggle is being exposed, and exposure is the beginning of freedom. You have felt the difference between body alarm and spiritual caution, even if you did not know how to name it. One tightens everything at once and leaves you scattered, while the other steadies you and makes you quiet. One pushes you toward panic, and the other pulls you toward attention. The body can react to old wounds, yes, but the spirit can also perceive a need for protection before your memory catches up. That is why there are moments when your heart beats faster around something that looks fine on the surface. It is not always a sign to fear. Sometimes it is a sign to pause. The lantern knows this in its own way. When the draft begins, the flame changes shape. It does not collapse, but it becomes careful. That carefulness is not weakness, it is intelligence. You have been learning to listen to the difference in yourself. A room may look welcoming and still feel too wide open. A person may sound kind and still leave the air thinner after they leave. A promise may sound generous and still require more than it gives. Your protection has been teaching you to trust the body's quiet witness without letting fear make the final decision. That balance is sacred. It keeps you from confusing every sensation with a prophecy, and it keeps you from dismissing every sensation as nothing. The lantern metaphor helps here, because a protected flame is not irrational for changing when the air changes. It is simply responsive to reality. You are learning to be that responsive without becoming ruled by reaction. That learning is part of your safety, and it is part of your maturity. There are relationships and spaces that do not resist you loudly. They simply keep asking for more of your light than they are willing to protect. They admire the flame, but do not prepare shelter for it. They want warmth, but not responsibility. That is where many chosen ones become tired, because they keep offering themselves in rooms that never learned how to hold what they receive. You may have spent too long trying to make certain connections safe by giving them more patience than they ever returned. The lantern in those rooms keeps getting exposed, and the problem is not that the flame is weak. The problem is the environment. Protection has been teaching you to notice which settings make you smaller and which settings allow your soul to breathe. That noticing is not cruelty, it is wisdom. You do not have to accuse every room to honor the ones that fit your life. But you do have to stop calling every open space a home. The hand that covers the lantern is not being possessive, it is being faithful. Faithfulness sometimes means refusing to hand your fire to people who only want the glow without the care. That message can sting because it asks you to release what is familiar. Yet familiar is not the same as safe. You already know that. You have felt the difference in your body long enough. The growing clarity in you is not making you hard. It is making you accurate. And accuracy is a form of love when it keeps you from scattering what was meant to be kept whole. If the image of the lantern and the draft is settling deep in you, let your like be your amen without words. It is not a metric here. It is an agreement that the truth was recognized. A silent amen says that your spirit understood what your mouth did not need to explain. Let that simple gesture mark the moment, and then keep walking with me. What was protected is not being exposed for vanity. It is being prepared for the right kind of light. That difference will matter more and more as the story continues. Not everyone who has touched your life has understood the weight of what you carry, and that has made some of your loneliness feel heavier than it needed to be. You have stood in rooms where people spoke easily, while you felt the cost of every word. You have nodded in conversations where your inside was already saying no. The lantern story reaches that place too, because a guarded flame must choose where it will be shown. You are beginning to understand that the choice is holy, not selfish. When you say no to what scatters you, you are saying yes to what preserves you. When you step back from a draining exchange, you are not failing at kindness. You are honoring the hand that has been protecting your light. It is a different kind of maturity to stop treating every invitation as a duty. It is a different kind of courage to let your peace be evidence. The forces that move to protect you have often worked through your own hesitation, your sudden unease, your impulse to wait one more minute before answering, your quiet refusal to enter too quickly. All of that has been part of the preservation. The corridor was not empty after all. It was attended, it was watched over, and even the length of the passage has been shaping you. You are not the same lantern that first entered the narrow place. You are more aware, more careful, and more capable of honoring your own flame. That is not a small change. It is the beginning of stability. It is what happens when protection succeeds. There is someone in your life who needs this exact message tonight. Someone quietly tired, someone secretly seeking, someone carrying a posture nobody sees, someone who looks strong but has been praying without words. Their face has likely come to mind while this has been unfolding. Send this to them, not as a recommendation, but as a delivery. Let it arrive the way it arrived to you, by appointment. There are moments when a message is not for your private collection only. It is meant to be carried to the attention. You need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.